This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete.
So, grab your adult beverage of choice, or grab the whole bottle, or tea or coffee. Get some dessert, please. Relax, and thank you for spending the next hour with us as Charlie is going to do a segment on postmortem events in people's lives. I'm going to talk about the use of artificial food and fluids.
Ooh, good.
What's on the menu, Charlie?
Well, did you know that there was such a thing as funeral potatoes?
You are so enthused about this.
Yes.
No,
Potatoes, potato hash browns,
Potatoes?
baked potatoes. You say potatoes, I say potatoes. You say tomatoes, but I say tomatoes.
Let's call the whole thing off, Charlie.
Very good. Oh, great. So see you next time then. Go get a cocktail. Oh, yes. Here, back to the business. So anyways, funeral potatoes. So these, because they're called funeral potatoes, are obviously associated with funerals. Funeral potatoes are a potato baked dish in a casserole. I mean, talk about comfort food. I mean, and it's usually, people serve it hot, potlucks or after pot or whatever, when you feel the need for comfort food.
But only where it's legal.
Well, yes, of course. And it really should be legal everywhere. So it's a tradition. It's an old tradition as opposed to a new tradition, where they're served at funerals. Hence the name. So maybe just this one time. Probably not just this one time. We will not focus on chocolate, but one of my other favorite groups, carbs. Mm. This is a true carbidiem. Get that carbidiem? Never mind. Carbidiem treat, which is Latin for day of carbs. I did not know that. Good thing I studied Latin in a Catholic school. So Reed Drummond's funeral potatoes from Food Network are extra comforting with hash brown potatoes. You can't have too many potatoes. So with hash brown potatoes, lots of cheese, and I've even seen people put potato chips in that. Mm. I don't agree with that, with the potato chips, but, a potato's potato. Potatoes.
Well, no, you crunch it up and you put it on the top and it gets all crispy and crunchy. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I've seen that occasionally. I've tried, something of food. What have I had? Like a sandwich. I think one time a bite of a burger. I mean, different. I don't know. Just the thought of crunching potato chips and putting them on something which is not natural in nature. I don't know.
Because potato chips are, they're grown out in Idaho.
No, in Idaho. It's a place because, Idaho has potatoes. Idaho grows potato chips. No, I'm with you. I understand. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
As long as we're clear.
All right. Very good. Oh, yes. So, cheese, hash browns, even potato chips. So, support Carbidiem. Every day is a great day for carbs.
Yeah. It's what life is made of. So the recipe is on our webpage, right?
everyonedies.org. That's dies.org. And listen, all you cool cats and kids out there, recipes. If you have recipes of your own, please share them with us. Send them to the website. Also, if you want to send any questions, jokes, anything else you want to tell us, within reason, you can email us at everyonedies.org. Also, please join our Facebook group, Everyone Dies. And please remember to rate and review this podcast. Molly, our Twitter wench, is hoping you contribute to her happiness by following us on Twitter and responding to her tweets.
That would make her so happy.
Yes, it will. The wench.
So, she is. So, Charlie,
Yes?
what post-mortem stories do you have for us?
Well, Marianne, postmortem comes in various grammatical forms. For example, postmortem, as a noun, it's the examination of a dead body to determine the cause of death. As an adjective, a corpse experiences postmortem changes. Now, for our purposes, well, maybe
Porpoises?
Well, maybe porpoises. Mammals
Do you
die,
have
die too.
porpoises in New York City?
They call him Flipper, faster than lightning. No one can see. What?
What?
I was going to say he's smarter than me, but that's really not saying that. Curse you, Flipper.
Damn.
I think at the aquarium in Coney Island they have. I've not been down there in years, but I think they have. Now I'm saying porpoises there.
The purpose of Coney Island is to go to Nathan's and eat Coney Islands.
Nathan still had its hot dog eating contest. I believe, yes, but.
They have to wear masks while they did it?
In an undisclosed remote area to make sure, people did not congregate. And it will basically be, if there is no B, it's for that. So people will not go and congregate and foolishly not wear masks. But no, it was held in a private location. Cameras were put on. I don't remember the guy's name, but he's won several times. I don't think he broke his record, but it was something like 75 hot dogs in. I know, jeez, I love hot dogs.
How is that
come on.
possible?
Oh, hot dogs, potato chips. I saw someone having that once. Yeah, just couldn't. No. And the
what do you eat with your hot dog? I always eat chips with my hot dog.
Well, it depends. If I'm in Detroit, always go to Lafayette. And yes, I'm plugging Lafayette, not American. Lafayette, with their, with everything. Chili.
Yes.
Fresh.
Cheese.
Cheese. What?
You don't put cheese?
Cheese? In Detroit? No.
I'm from Detroit. I put cheese and onions and mustard and chili.
Yeah, I'm afraid this relationship has ended. I'd say no. I have never. No. I'm sorry. Is it grated cheese?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I've had cheese on the chili. I've never had it on a hot dog. No, for me, it's just the way my father and my grandmother all did. Chili. That great Detroit chili, the onions and a sliver of mustard. That's it.
Well, you should walk on the wild side and put a little shredded cheese on that bad boy.
Actually, when I lived in Cincinnati,
they have good chili.
Yes, it's a different type of chili.
What was that place in Cincinnati? Yeah.
Skyline is the most famous.
That was good.
And they have it's called a cheese coney. So their conies are about half the size of a regular sized hot dog. And yes, on it you have chili and cheese and onions. Yeah.
Well, you didn't eat that there?
No, I did. It was a different type of. Yeah, it was just a different hot dog experience. Say hello to the puppies for me.
I will.
It's just a different type of hot dog. Like Chicago. The dogs are getting riled up about the hot dogs in Chicago. I mean, they have a Chicago dog, which is a completely different style of hot dog. They have
right with a pickle smear.
That's it. That pickle
spear.
I have it there. I guess it just depends where you are. But I came to enjoy cheese conies very much. But still, it's always Detroit for me.
I miss a good hot dog.
And what was I talking about? No, I don't remember.
Oh, postmortem. Postmortem and porpoises.
So, porpoise, oh, right.
Please. Are you having a senior moment?
Oh, that's interesting. You know what? I think that's a very good example of ageism. Because I remember there was Michael, my son, would sometimes say, I didn't remember where I left something or I couldn't find something. And at one time he said something about, Dad, are you having a senior moment or you're getting old? Well, he did say you're getting old, but you have a senior moment. And then one time he couldn't find his car keys. or rather the keys to his mother's car. And I said, Michael, is this a senior moment? And he looked at me and goes, no, I just don't remember where I put them. He goes, so what's the difference between you not remembering and me not remembering where I put them?
And the answer was?
Actually, he did not come up with anything clever or try to change the subject. He just looked at me like, oh, shit, he's making sense.
The one time in your life you made sense.
Hardly. So, no, it's not a senior moment. I just forgot where I was.
You were on porpoises.
On purpose. Adverb. That's it. Postmortems. So, when we use it as an adverb, the idea is that it's after death. That something has happened after death. I mean, think of Law and Order. The bruising occurred.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's it. Dun, dun. The bruising occurred post-mortem, for example. Okay, so with that, also with things occurring after post-mortem testing, which I know it's in other parts of the country too, but when New York was being hit hardest with the coronavirus, there was a lot of postmortem, and it is still happening now, but a lot of postmortem being done on people to determine if they had died from coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, it also helped doctors and scientists define variations of the viruses, how it was affecting different people in different ways, based on age, pre-existing conditions, and start stuff like that. I mean, it just became a whole little cottage industry. I guess it's a bad way to put it, but
could you hear my brain going to cottage industry? Okay.
Yeah, choice of words. Okay, so
at least we amuse each other, Charles.
That's true. Be good if we amuse other people too. So with all this, you might be thinking, that's fine, Charlie, but what about space burials? Well, I'm glad you asked. For as little as $2,500, that's $2,500, you could send cremated remains into space, suborbitally. I really have had nothing to drink but water today. Suborbitally.
Maybe you should.
I know. Suborbitally? Or what? Yeah. Yeah, so for $2,500, you can send, a small sample of cremated remains into space. And it'll just be a suborbital flight. Jeez.
And then what happens when you get there?
Oh, no. You don't get there. The remains get there.
What happens to them?
Well, the flight's only a few minutes. The payload returns to Earth. And you not only get back the remains, but a certificate of authenticity, in case anyone doubts your authenticity. Additionally.
That seems like a waste of money. Like if I turned into a star or something, then be cool. Look, there's the Marianne star, but...
Well, interesting that you say that. Because Star Trek... Da, 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 da. All these little things I'm humming. Is there like a time limit before somebody calls up and says, you owe us royalties on that?
I don't think so because
Mhm.
they're all probably not alive anymore.
Okay. So, yeah. So,
And if you are still alive, I apologize.
okay.
Okay.
So with that, yeah. So, I mean, but there are different levels of these things. So either, a small, and when I say small, I mean a tiny little container of cremated remains. You can take it to a next, a further step, and have like a longer flight. And some of the people, when you mentioned, you would do that if you had the money, if you were a big star. Actually, people from Star Trek have done this. Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, and his wife Majel Barrett, who at first, in the series played Nurse Chapel, Christine Chapel, and then in one, maybe two of the movies, she was Dr. Chapel, and along with James Doohan, Scotty. Their ashes were sent up into space. Also, out of this world was psychologist, LSD advocate, and FBI informant Timothy Leary. Did you know he was an FBI informant?
No. Was he really?
Yes, he was.
Wow. Well, what did he inform about?
people taking LSD.
Oh, God.
No, it was something to do with what the FBI considered poo. Oh gosh, what is it? Activities against the government. The protesters. What's
yeah?
But what's the adjective
Sedition?
I'm looking for? There you go. That could be interpreted as acts of sedition. Yes. Who else? Also in the space, astronaut Gordon Cooper. He was the last. Yeah, he was the last astronaut of the Mercury 7 missions, the original one of the original 7. Now, there's actually one person which went further, and his ashes are on the moon. Mm-hmm. This is Dr. Eugene Shoemaker, co-discoverer of Comet Shoemaker-Levy 7. No, wait a minute, that's wrong. Comet, right? Shoemaker-Levy 9.
What is that?
It's a comet. So he.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so he and another scientist, it might have been two of them, discovered this particular comet, and please don't ask me why this comet is special. But they named the comet in their honor, and it's called Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9. I don't know about
I
learned
1 through 8. Something new today.
Yeah. So anyway, some of his ashes were sent to the moon aboard a space probe, and his remains are still there. Who would have thought?
That's cool.
But because this is America, and we are never to be outdone, there are there was an astronomer named Clyde Tombaugh, and his ashes were placed on board a space probe called New Horizons. This probe was sent to photograph Pluto, the planet.
The dog?
See, you always catch me on these things. Right, I need to clarify this. So, yeah, the space probe was sent to Pluto, the planet, not Pluto, the dog.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Tombaugh, discovered Pluto in 1930. So, as to honor him, as I said, his ashes were put on the probe. The probe, reached Pluto, and it's on its way out of the. I don't know if it's already out of the solar system, but it's on its way out of the solar system with his ashes. Yep. So, back on Earth, every year, thousands of cremated remains remain unclaimed. Now, the ashes of an average-sized adult is about the same. It's about the same as a 5-pound bag of flour. So, times that by 50. And there's only so much
Wow.
shelf space. Depending on any particular on any funeral home or a crematorium, and of course legal liability, these lost remains might be scattered after a specific period of time, kept in a cremation closet, which would be like a non-public area, like a basement or a storage unit, buried in a mass grave, or interred in a columbarium, which is a public storage of urns. Columbaria can be freestanding structures or built into churches, similar to traditional Buddhist temples, which hold cremated ashes. In China, they are placed in a naguda, which translates to bone-receiving pagoda. While the Japanese have let me pronounce this correctly, Nogosuda. That's it. The Japanese have a Nogosuda, also known as bone-receiving hall. It's a common practice that family members visit, temples to hold traditional memorials and ancestral rites. Further, moving on, in a different direction, Albert Einstein. You would really take a break and have a cocktail. Oh, you know what? Chocolate milk.
What?
But chocolate milk, like we had chocolate milk when we were kids. None of this mamby-pamby, watered-down crap now.
With Nestle's Quick?
No. Well, Nestle's Quick is always good. No. You could go and buy, bottled chocolate milk.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
you'd have that at school. Didn't you get that at school?
Oh, yes.
That was the best.
They were. It was like, I don't know if it had cream in it, but it was just heavier, thicker, very flavorful. Ooh, that was.
And we weren't obese, but we drank that heavy chocolate milk. Sorry, Sandy.
But but I'm a kid, so we would drink that and run out on the playground, or just we burn it off, easily. Boy, yeah. Okay. So from the corners of my mind. Yeah, with that segue, Albert Einstein.
All this stuff Albert Einstein would not have done.
Well, I don't know, Mr. Einstein, Dr. Einstein. Everything I've read, read some of his quotes sometimes and some of his pictures. He could be a real goofball. He, in addition just to being a brilliant, scientist, just seemed to know when to have a good laugh and enjoy himself.
As opposed to us who are just goofballs.
Huh? Oh, that's right, Mickey. Oh, that's right, Marianne. So Professor Einstein, who died of an aneurysm in 1955, was cremated as per his wishes. He did not want his body or brain studied, but, and there's always a but, during the autopsy, pathologist Thomas Harvey removed Einstein's brain and kept it.
Oh my God.
For
That's
decades.
terrible.
For decades.
What, just in a jar? Or did he study it?
Well, yes, he did study it. But, he redeemed himself, I guess. No, he didn't redeem himself. He also removed Einstein's eyes and gave them to Einstein's ophthalmologist. So
what the heck?
So he has that going for him. But yes.
He should have lost his license. That's just wrong.
Oh, they were simpler times, I guess. Yes, I agree, though. So Dr. Harvey is a pathologist? Yeah, pathologist. Yeah, doctor. So Dr. Harvey, yes, he did dissect the brain. He wanted to see what made Einstein Einstein. So, different experience. He wasn't alone. Eventually there were others, but so like I said, he died. Einstein died in 1955. So So obviously, there had been no permission given by Einstein's family, but all this was discovered in the late 70s.
Oh my gosh.
So the family obviously also found out. But when they realized, Harvey had been conducting studies all this time, they allowed him to continue and to publish the results but only in scientific journals. And then it would be okay. So they allowed him to continue with that. But again, there over the years, decades, there were studies from various scientists, and because we know curious minds are curious, just what was found regarding Einstein's brain, in Einstein's brain. Well, one scientist discovered that Einstein's brain had more glial cells relative to neurons, but, and this is the interesting part, only in the left inferior parietal was the difference statistically significant. I could go on, but I didn't know what I was talking about then. I wouldn't know what I'm talking about with the next example.
So, what's the point? Mm-hmm. It's not like you can make more glial cells in the parietal lobe in any way.
Hang on, I need to write this down in case I have to repeat this word again. Parietal. Okay. Yes, I agree with you 100%. I don't know what you're talking about, but the what it basically was that him and all these other people wanted to see if what it was, and as you said, it's not like you can replicate this, but I don't know, maybe just to keep records, and at some point in the future, maybe like now, be able to artificially create that, to enhance that in someone's brain, to try to recreate an Einstein. I don't know.
No, they'll end up recreating a Frankenstein is what they'll do.
I agree. Yeah.
See what I did there?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Yeah, I did.
I was going to try to sing a little bit of Putting on the Ritz. Remember from Young Frankenstein?
Oh, my God, that was funny.
Yeah, very, very funny film. Oh, there we are. You know what? That could be, Back from the Dead. Okay, so remind me, category, Back from the Dead. Postmortem.
Postmortem. There you have it.
Good. Postmortem. Free association. Mm-hmm. So from...
but is it really free?
How would it not be free?
Well, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Is there such a thing as free association?
This is too much for my little brain. It's time for that chocolate milk. Oh, that's interesting. Well, all right. What?
Should we talk about artificial food and fluids then, while you have your artificial chocolate milk? Well, and that was interesting. I don't know if that's what you planned, but... But the singing, the dancing, I laughed, I cried. It was wonderful.
Oh, no, I made that up as I went along. and with most things, so...
So I thought I would talk about artificial food and fluids. First, really to talk about malnutrition and dehydration in general, and then talk about it at the end of life. So in the past, people who were at the end of their life, there was really no way to get any kinds of food or fluids into them, before IVs or feeding tubes or things like that. They, if you ever go into an antique store, they have these little, I think they're called invalid cups or something like that. And they're little
invalid cup?
Yeah. So it's like this cup that has like a little, it's almost like a mustache cup, but it has like a little spout on it so that you could put like clear fluids, that kind of thing, and drip it into somebody's mouth. And that way, at least it felt like they were getting some fluids into people. But other than that, once a person was unable to swallow on their own, they would just stop eating because they couldn't anymore, and then eventually that they would die. But now, with technology, we can correct because we can put tubes in people and feeding tubes in people and feed them artificially. So when we talk about feeding and eating and, our funeral potatoes, it's anything that you can put in your mouth and you can chew it and you can swallow it. But when we're talking about artificial food and fluids, we're talking about using technology to get that stuff in. So I want people to sort of think about, we're not talking about a slice of pizza and a beer that we're withholding or keeping from somebody to starve them. What we're talking about is using technology when the person, because of their physical condition, can no longer do it on their own. And so then the question becomes, what is the point? What is the goal of care? When I was really sick in the hospital and in the ICU, they put a feeding tube into my belly and they put a line into my neck to give me TPN or total parenteral nutrition and fed me that way because I was in a coma. And, if I was going to survive, I needed to have artificial food and fluids with the assumption that I could recover. Go ahead.
So with that, so when people are fed like that, it's always, I don't know why, in my mind I thought they put a tube down your throat, but it's a tube that goes, you're fed directly into your stomach whenever you have, in that situation?
So it depends if it's a short-term or if it's a long-term thing. They can put a tube through your nose and down into your stomach, but you can run risks of aspiration, meaning that fluid can come back up and go into your lungs. It's a pretty simple operation to just put the feeding tube right into the belly and feed directly that way.
As a patient, would I have a say in that, or would the doctor or nurse just make that determination?
Well, if you were awake, you would have a say in it. And if you were unable to speak for yourself, you would have, hopefully, an advance directive, and you'd have somebody who you designated to speak for you. And remember, when we talked about advance directives, we said, so what's the prognosis? Is this a short-term thing? So yeah, put in the feeding tube for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever and see how they do. See if they're going to be able to survive and come off of that. Better to do it and see what's going to happen than not do it and not give that opportunity. But if you have a situation, let's say like end-stage Alzheimer's disease, where it's irreversible and untreatable, well, there's no point because they're not going to come out of it. There's no question there.
Right.
And so that decision can be made well ahead of time if you want to have artificial nutrition and hydration.
Okay, just for the record, and I'll I need to add that to my advance directive. I never thought, I didn't know that there could be an option. I would prefer it directly into my stomach. So thank you for that. I need to add that to my advance directive.
Well, but It's also in terms of, like how long you're going to have it for and that kind of thing. So malnutrition and dehydration can be corrected in nearly every patient who would otherwise have died from whatever condition that they have. Nutritional support will improve survival if there's like an acute problem, like acute renal failure, or can improve postoperative outcomes, or protect from cancer therapy toxicity and improve survival of cancer patients. In terms of we have a lot of patients who will get radiation to, like for head and neck cancer. Well, when you're having radiation like that, it is darn near impossible to swallow after a few treatments. And we would always say to people, let's put a feeding tube in. Then you don't have to think about it. You don't have to get dehydrated. Come into the hospital in an emergency situation and have it placed. Let's do it ahead of time and plan for this. And I can't tell you how many people are like, oh my God, no, I don't want a feeding tube. You know, it's like, dude, it's short term while you're having this treatment for as long as you need it until your throat heals from the radiation that we're giving you. So there's a difference when it's an acute situation as opposed to an end-of-life situation. So I want our listeners to really kind of get that idea that there's two different kind of times where it can be used. In acute situations, like I've mentioned, or like, you know, in my situation where that was an acute thing, or there was a question of, well, you know, will they come out of it? And then those situations where it's end-stage disease that is making it so that people can't swallow any longer. So when we're talking about malnutrition, the definition of malnutrition is you lose greater than 5 pounds in a month or 10% weight loss in 6 months. And whenever I see somebody I haven't seen in a while and they've lost like a lot of weight, generally what I'll say was, oh, you know, you've lost some weight. Were you trying? Because if somebody was trying to lose weight and they lost greater than 5 pounds in a month, then great, you know, if that's what they were trying to do because they felt they needed to lose some weight. But if you're not trying to lose weight and the weight is just coming off, that's not normal. And so you should say to yourself, what's going on? Why am I losing weight like this when I'm not trying? Malnutrition, so that's how they define malnutrition. When you have a negative nitrogen balance, which is called ketosis. Now, again, if you're on a diet that is to induce ketosis, well then, you know, we're not going to assume that that's malnutrition, that's part of what your body's doing. Weakness is also a part of malnutrition, and skeletal muscle wasting, meaning that what happens is that your body says, oh my God, I'm starving, and you're not putting in enough food for me, so I need to have some protein. And so what it does is it starts to waste the muscle, use the muscle that you have for nutrition. And what your body naturally does is it says, you know, I really need to keep the brain and the heart intact. So, you know, those guns that person has, or, you know, wherever else the muscle is, the body will take that and leave the heart for last because it knows it needs that. Complications of malnutrition are anemia. People can have swelling. Mm-hmm. If they get a wound, be poor wound healing, increased risk of infection, decreased energy, cold intolerance, hair loss, and just a generalized wasting of body tissues. So that's what we call malnutrition, and that's what malnutrition looks like. Now, with being unable to swallow comes also dehydration because you're not drinking water, you're not drinking fluids. And what you'll see in dehydration, what make you think is a dehydration, is a decrease in blood pressure. So what happens is you don't have enough fluids to hold that blood pressure up. And so the blood pressure gets low, and your heart says, oh my God, the blood pressure is getting low. I better work faster to help keep this body alive. So you see a low blood pressure and a high pulse rate in situations of dehydration. When you go to stand up, you get woozy because your body has to compensate for that change in position. And when your blood pressure is low and there's not enough fluid in your body, it has trouble doing that. So you might see somebody who stands up and then like falls right over. And so that's part of dehydration. It also can be heart problems too, but you look at it with the whole thing. Decreased urinary output and loss of weight because fluids weigh. About a liter of fluids will weigh about 5 pounds when you're drinking it. And if you're not taking it in, you're not going to pee it out. It's because your body's going to hold on to as much as it can. In terms of the skin, you see dry, warm skin. If you were to pinch the skin like on the chest like this, instead of it bouncing back, it kind of stays tented up because it has lost its elasticity because it has less fluid. You can also see confusion, disorientation, and soft sunken eyeballs in people who are dehydrated. Yeah. So weight loss is usually the best indicator of fluid loss. Skin turgor, if you're feeling that skin, is best over the sternum, over the chest, or over the forehead. Sometimes people will do it on the hand, and the hand is not the best place because you're going to look like you have poor skin turgor if you're old, if you do it on the hand. So do it on the chest or do it on the forehead. Healthy people who have dehydration are going to report that they might feel pain or abdominal cramps, nausea, vomiting, a dry mouth. Terminal patients, so people who are at the end of their life, will only really would say that they have a dry mouth. And often that's unrelated to their hydration. Usually it's related to the medicines that they're taking. Because when you're at the end of your life, your body says, I don't want any of that stuff. I've got enough to do to keep my heart beating without taking in any kind of food or fluids that then my body has to deal with. So at the end of life, the body kind of begins to but it begins to shut down, and it doesn't need anything else to do. And if you force that, then what happens? You'll see people swell up, that kind of thing, because they don't have the heart muscle to push all that stuff around. So it just kind of sits there. In terms of the research, there's really little evidence that dehydration causes thirst. Some studies have shown moderate thirst, but no correlation to hydration. Other causes of thirst in the terminally ill are medications, mouth breathing, or increased respirations. And there have been no studies that show that hydration increases comfort at the end of life. So if the reason that you're saying, oh my God, we have to put an IV in and we have to give fluids is because you want your loved one to be more comfortable, there's no evidence that says that that's what's going to happen. What you're doing is placing an additional burden on a body that is beginning to shut down. And I appreciate that you think, oh my God, I need to do something because I don't want this person to die. Well, that piece needs to be dealt with, not putting additional pressure on that body to try to do something. So what is artificial hydration and nutrition? This is really medical treatment that allows a person to receive fluids and artificial food, it's not actual food, when they're no longer able to take them by mouth. It's given to a patient who's not able to eat or drink enough to sustain life or health. Hydration and nutrition can be provided by an IV or putting a tube in the stomach, through the nose, or directly through the abdomen. Tube placement can be done by a nurse, and the more invasive kinds into the stomach are done by a physician. So is artificial nutrition and hydration different than ordinary eating and drinking? Yes, it is very different. It requires technology. Artificial food and fluids require technology to get that in. Nourishment, though, is more than food and drink. Artificial hydration and nutrition do not offer the comforts that comes from the taste and texture of liquids and foods, nor the pleasure of socializing at mealtimes. Now, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but when my mom had her major stroke and was receiving hospice care, we decided no artificial food and fluids. And I was taking care of my mom. My brother came over one day, and I was feeding my mom some yogurt. And he said, I thought we said no food and fluids. I said, well, we said no artificial food and fluids. But what I was doing was taking a little bit of that nice cold yogurt, putting it on a spoon, and letting her taste it. She was able to take small amounts, and there's a comfort in that. It got to a point, maybe a week or two into my taking care of her, where she wasn't able to swallow anything that was put into her mouth, not even the yogurt. And so I stopped doing it. But there is comfort in receiving and tasting and smelling food. When my sister was very, very sick and near the end of her life, I made a cake that my mother used to make when we were kids. And I knew she wasn't going to eat but a bite of it, but that wasn't the point. The point was to make it and to look at my mom's recipe book with her and for her to smell it and for her to say, oh, the baking soda's there or whatever. And then she had a small bite of it and she's like, that's good. But what happens with a lot of families, though, is that they feel frustrated. I just spent 2 hours making you this cake, and all you did was eat one bite. Yeah. Well, your expectation should be they're only going to eat one bite. And if they eat two, then consider yourself lucky, because the body doesn't want it. It's a burden. And so there is such a thing called recreational eating, which is generally how I live my life. Recreational eating. So recreational eating is in particular at the end of life where people eat because of the comfort or because of the smell. It's a bite. And my other sister, who had cancer metastasized to her paratracheal space, which is that little side area there in your neck, and she couldn't swallow. We got her a feeding tube and that kind of thing because earlier in her cancer, not at the end. And I would take her into University of Michigan for her chemotherapy. And I remember once saying, oh man, I'd want a White Castle. And she says, let's go get a White Castle.
Yeah.
I know, right? And so I went and on the way back got a White Castle. Could she eat it? No. But she got one and she smelled it and she took a bite and she chewed it and she had to spit it out because she couldn't swallow it. But that's recreational eating. That's taking something because of the flavor or the smell, or, like you just, I just want a sip of that beer, or how often do you go, you go past a Ray's Pizza and say, I'm not really hungry, but let's go get a slice. It's that kind of, I'm doing it because it's fun, because it feels good, and not with consideration of nutrition. So are there benefits from hydration for terminally ill patients? It's possible that you can correct an electrolyte imbalance. It's symbolic of nurturing. It makes it look like you're doing something, because when you have somebody who's at the end of their life, you want to feel like you're doing something. You want to feel like you're taking care of them. And if you can feed somebody and give somebody food, then it feels like you're taking care of them. But I want you to realize it's what you're doing is for you. And for the person who's dying, they find that pretty frustrating. I'd go in, when I was working in hospice, I'd go in and, go into the kitchen and wash my hands first thing. And the wife or the daughter, whoever was taking care, say, well, you talk to him, he really needs to eat, And I would say, well, if he's not feeling like eating, that's okay. That's kind of what this time is about. Well, no, it's important. I cook for him and he needs to eat. And then I would go in to see the patient and I'd be listening to their heart or taking their vitals, and they'd say, will you talk to her and tell her to leave me alone about eating? I'd say,
Yeah.
All right, let's everybody come together and let's talk about this, because I'm being, ambushed in the kitchen and ambushed some, it's like, no, let's just talk to each other about what it is that you want, what's going on with your body, and why you don't feel like it. It's not like they don't like your cooking. They like your cooking. They just don't want to eat. And that's okay. That's normal at that point. So there's very few benefits to hydration in terminal patients, but are there burdens? And yes, and there are a lot of burdens, and the burdens far outweigh any benefits. So the burdens are, there's increased urinary output. If you're putting fluids in, you gotta pee it out. Well, if you're so weak you can't get out of bed to go to the bathroom or hold your own urinal or get out fast enough before you wet yourself, you can end up wetting yourself. And people don't like that. They don't like to feel like they're not in control of their body. They don't like to be a burden to the people taking care of them, because then they have to change their pajamas and wash them off and change the bed.
Yeah.
They don't want that. Plus, it's not good for their skin. So here you are putting something in, and it's a burden for them to put it out. There can be an increase in the fluids in their stomach because, if you're putting it, directly into a tube in their stomach, their body's got to create something to try to digest it. And that itself can cause nausea and vomiting and pain. And all those extra tubes act as a barrier between the patient and the family. If you want to go and hug or cuddle or lay with that person, you got to work around all those tubes. And they're not helping anyway. So then the question is, why are we doing it? And those tubes can cause, if it's in their nose, can cause breakdown and pain in their nose. People can have increased in diarrhea because you're putting those fluids in. So it's just a really hard situation for people to say, we're not going to use artificial food and fluids. It's going to cause more of a burden than a benefit, because we are culturally associate food and fluids with nurturing.
Yeah, right. And nurturing comfort. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And if I love you, I'm going to feed you.
Right. Exactly.
And of course I love you. And it's hard for the brain to say, but I can't give you that right now because it's not going to help. So if you're withholding artificial, if you're not using artificial fluids and the person can't swallow or take sips for themselves, what it does is the body kind of begins to dry up. But that's good because it's easier for people to be able to breathe. They have less edema, that's swelling that's in the body. If there's a tumor, also, the tumor often puts pressure on nerves and causes pain. Well, if there's less hydration, the tumor can dehydrate too. Now, I'm not saying it goes away or anything like that, but it can dehydrate just enough to take some of that pressure off of those nerves so that there's less pain associated with that. And also, when you go into that ketotic state from not having food and fluids, the body is quite brilliantly made in that naturally occurring opioid peptides give pain management. So when your body goes into that ketotic state from not eating and drinking on your own, and you let the body do what it's made to do, the body says, oh, okay, here's these naturally endorphins. You hear people who get like that runner's high from the release of their endorphins.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I personally have never run to cause my endorphins to do anything, so I haven't personally experienced it. But for those of you who've had, you know what I'm talking about. Well, it's that mechanism that the increased level of endorphins that come closer to death give the production of the opioid peptides. And so there's natural pain relief that comes built into our bodies if we let our bodies die naturally. If you don't give artificial fluids, the only potential burden is that they might be a dry mouth. But if there is, you can do really good mouth care, and that's fine. And it can look like you've abandoned that person. And you might have people, I don't know, on Facebook or in your church or wherever who say, oh my God, you're not giving them anything to drink. And you think, oh my God, I really should be giving them something to drink. No, they don't. They haven't listened to this podcast. They don't know that you're doing the right thing. It's okay. You can either direct them over here or just nicely tell them to mind their business.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of societal things, and also just a lot of old wives' tales too about you should do this, you should do that, and I mean, different cultures, different things.
Yeah. So what can you do? It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can do the recreational feeding. You can give, like I did with my sister, give her the White Castle, let her chew it, let her feel it, and, let her spit it out. It's okay. If they're, able. Yeah.
With that, I'm curious. So I understand someone might not be able to chew food, but just a sensation, you chew, you spit it out. So if someone can't swallow food, I'm sorry, can they still swallow?
They can swallow little bits. Yeah. Well, okay. I say yes, but it depends on what's going on.
No. I don't mean food. But I don't remember how much. But we swallow just in general every day, all the time.
Right. So that's why I kind of backtracked and said it depends on what's going on. So like with my sister who had a tumor in her throat, she could not swallow her own spit. So we had like a little suction machine, and she could just like put that little straw thing in her mouth and suction out her own spit. She couldn't even swallow her own spit. Most people, though, unless there's a tumor in their throat, they will still be able to swallow that small amount of spit. And that's how, like we'll give liquid medicine. We just put it into the cheek of their mouth and it'll just dribble down. So it depends. For most people, though, the answer is, they can swallow that little bit just fine.
Okay.
So the primary goal of palliative care is to provide the highest quality of life possible through effective pain and symptom management. Often, this goal requires that you don't use artificial nutrition and hydration because it's going to create more of a burden for the patient than benefit. So we need to determine that what are the burdens and benefits of artificial food and fluids so that they can determine whether the treatment will satisfy the patient's goals of care and not feel like they're hurting the person at the end of their life. And so it's hard for us to change the way we think about this, but knowing the facts about how the body shuts down and dies gives you that information that you need to say there's not a benefit to doing that. Now, I know we have a lot of listeners, too, who have family members like with Alzheimer's disease, which is different than a tumor growth or anything like that. Part of Alzheimer's disease is that ability to swallow gets lost, and you'll see that in Parkinson's and other kinds of diseases. And so you say, well, they can't swallow, and so if we put a feeding tube in, they'll be safer. Because what'll happen with people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's is that they'll swallow, and because it's not an effective swallow, it'll go into their lungs and result in a pneumonia. So people will say, well, put a feeding tube in, that tube's way down in their stomach. they're going to be fine. They're not going to aspirate anymore. Well, no, there have been studies done that say that is not true, that in fact people will aspirate more because you're putting in more fluids, and just because it's going into the belly doesn't mean that it doesn't rise up and result in an aspiration pneumonia. So no, that's not true. Look at the research. It makes it look like you're doing something, and it makes you think, well, I can have them for a little while longer, but it's a burden on their body to do that rather than just let nature take its course.
Geez, it's a lot.
It is. And it's, I think, an important thing to educate yourself about so that you can say, do I want this? Do I not? But if you think that in cases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, that putting in that feeding tube is going to prevent aspiration, the data says that's not true. It won't. So, any other questions for me, Charlie, about that?
Yeah, but everything's a joke, so no. No, I don't want to take away from what you said. That's
no, it's a hard one, especially culturally, when we say, "What do you mean you're not going to feed me?" Yeah. But when your body's in that state, it doesn't want it. It doesn't know what to do with it, and it says, "Please don't. Please don't push that." We have additional resources for this podcast on our webpage at everyonedies.org. It's EVERY, the number 1, dies.org. If there's topics that you'd like us to discuss, please write in, let us know. We're happy to do that.
So, with that, thank you all for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, retired Major General David, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, Molly, our Twitter correspondent, and our friends, family, and our loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.